sitting right here, the man who has blazed a trail for Kyle Brandt in the National Football League universe media group. Is none other than Princeton's finest, and now from Ross Tucker Football Podcast, fame, CBS Sports, and so much more. Westwood One as well. Good to see you, Ross Tucker. How are you, sir?
Doing awesome. Always great to be out here. Always great to see you. I'm really looking forward to tomorrow when I'm going to learn from this guy named Rich Eisen at the NFL's broadcast boot
showing
camp.
Up. Hey, I'm showing up.
Wow, bringing the big guns.
No, stop. It's every year. It gets bigger and bigger every year, and more and more players who are young and still quite active with years you would think left on their football careers are showing up and trying to figure out what the next step is. Well, I mean, I think in part of that is, again, it's the NFL broadcast boot camp when years and years and years ago it was done out of NFL films. Yeah. And now they moved it out to Los Angeles, and it seems to have doubled and tripled the number of players that are coming in to learn.
I think it's easier. You know, it's funny, Rich, I went to the first one they ever had.
You did?
Yeah, so
you're an original.
Yeah, so it's 2007.
Okay.
And at the time, I thought I would still get into finance. Like, I had a couple job offers on Wall Street my senior year of college, so I kind of thought I'll do that. But then I was getting towards the end of my career, and I thought, I got to do something football. So I honestly thought I would live in Manhattan, do finance, and then, like, just do the Princeton football games on the radio. Mm-hmm. But I love football so much, I had to do something. So they had this broadcast boot camp, and I said, okay, I'll go. See what it's like. The one thing I remember the most from that is that James Brown is here because you do these like demo reels, right?
Yeah.
James Brown asked me a question. I had done a million interviews at that point. I realized in that he asked me a question, and they had said to us, invite the third person into the conversation, aka the camera, right?
Yes.
So Rich, James asked me a question. I'm like, I looked at the camera, totally froze for like 3 seconds.
No kidding.
No matter how many interviews you do as an NFL player, you never actually look at the camera.
Right.
You know, you're looking at the person talking with you. So James Brown, and it's like James Brown, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
James Brown, and he asked me a question, and I go, well, James, I think that Tom Brady, like, it was jarring to actually look at that thing for the first time.
Right. But, you know, it's not the first thing you're supposed to do also. You know, when you're answering a question is not but you didn't know that yet. Right. And that's why these boot camps are very important, is for you to get that knowledge down, the reps. You need the reps. You need to keep getting reps. And I think that's why so many players are showing up more and more during their playing days with obvious more playing years to come, even though you never know when that last snap is ever going to hit. But I think that it's a smart move of players to do that. But it's also out of what I think is an interesting necessity, because how many players have podcasts now? Like, if you would, like, which coach when you were playing would have been like, get out of here if you said, I've got a podcast?
Oh my gosh.
You know?
Belichick, no chance. Parcells, no chance. Marty Schottenheimer would have looked at me like I had three heads. Like, it's, and I'll say this too.
But not anymore.
Those guys have a huge advantage starting something as an active player now.
Yeah.
Because what I always tell people is I sort of lucked into the podcast game because I retired and I wrote something for Peter King. So then I was writing for Sports Illustrated. ESPN hired me to write for them, and they said, do you want to host our football podcast? I said, I would love to. It's 2009, Rich, maybe 2010.
Yeah.
I literally had no idea what a podcast was.
Sure.
I didn't know they were going to pay me to talk about football. So I did that for 3 years, and I went on my own. Because if I tried to start a podcast now, it would be very, very difficult. My advantage or whatever was that I was one of the originals back in 2012, and I was able to bring over that ESPN audience. Right now, unless you're a guy starting it while you're a player, good luck. Which is why what the Kelseys did is genius. What any of these guys do, Reddick, like, what you need to start it while you're playing, because that's when people care the most about what you're saying. Because it's a lot harder if you start a couple years after you're done playing.
But you also have to be careful, because what happens if you're in the middle of like an 0-6 start? You know what I mean? And now you're telling your coach, your teammates, I'm tapping out of doing my pod right now. And then if you are starting a pod while you're playing, you want that inside information. I mean, for instance, Draymond Green gets ejected from a game 4 minutes in when the Warriors need him to be on the court against Orlando.
Right.
He doesn't. He basically leaves his teammates, on the battlefield. They wound up winning anyway. He doesn't speak after the game, but he goes on his own podcast to give comments on it. And it's just, it still is, maybe because I'm old school, a little jarring here to see that. But you also have to be ready to give information that folks are tuning in to hear. And you might not be up for giving that information because your team's circling the drain, you know?
You have to answer the questions that everybody's talking about as it relates to you and your team. It's funny that you brought that up, Rich, because maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I'm pretty good friends with Ryan Fitzpatrick. We have the Ivy League thing going, right?
Yeah.
So
Wait a minute, he went to the Ivy League?
What's that?
No, I'm just kidding.
He went to Harvard. So I said to Fitzpatrick, and you guys will love this. I was like, hey, what do you think about coming on my show every week, sort of like Aaron Rodgers does with McAfee? And he's like, no, I don't want to do that. I said, why? He's like, because like after week 5, when I throw 4 picks and we lose, I don't want to come on that week.
Yeah.
He knew, like, he had already thought about it. Like, I don't want to do that week. Because he's streaky, great player, great guy, but he already had thought that far ahead. Like, no, that's not for me.
It was only just a few years ago, Ross, that again, I think that Brandon Marshall would do Inside the NFL as a Jet. And there were some sensitivities, or as a Bear. I forget when it was.
I think it might have been Bear.
And there were some sensitivities, just like, hey, so you're going to, in the middle of a playing season, you're going to fly to New Jersey. You're going to do a broadcast career. And that gives off the indication that players can't do 2 things at once. They can't be a terrific professional and also focus on their next career. When I guess, if I'm not mistaken, Len Dawson, or did Fouts do like local broadcasts? He did. Or Fouts would do, I think, some local like sportscasts after his playing career. But I think Len Dawson would do some stuff back in the day when he was playing also. I think the stigma is removed now, though. I think it's totally, everybody expects everyone to have a pod and still talk about it, and it's to their benefit. It really is.
It's interesting timing, Rich, because I just saw this week people are now talking about Micah Parsons' act wearing thin.
Yeah, what's up with that?
In Dallas.
Well, I saw that.
And I think part of it is because he does have his own show and he does have an opinion on everything. Mm-hmm. So it really is interesting because there's that balance between you can really get paid doing it while you're a player, and if you want to do that stuff after you're a player, you need to start it while you're a player, but you also don't want to put your current team in a bad situation. And I think I don't know what the Cowboys people saying. I mean, I know this. He's one of the 5 best players in the league.
Yeah.
So every other team would take him. I don't know what's wearing him. Every other team would take him. But I do think it's interesting that evidently multiple people had said that to Sean Sheriff, who's on Odyssey in Dallas, local radio.
Yeah, speaking on behalf of all the fan bases of the 31 other teams in the National Football League, and I look at my Dallas Cowboy friend who just arrived from Philadelphia, TJ Jefferson, please keep talking and giving your opinions, Micah Parsons. If he's going to podcast his way out of Dallas.
Is that our fault? Because remember when he came on and it was like the Micah Parsons show, and you guys switched. Yeah, you guys switched.
Yeah, we switched seats. He said he wants to be a host, and I'm like, all right, let's do a broadcast boot camp right here. I sat in where you're the guest seat, and he sat here. So he took it over.
It might be our fault. We might have helped create this.
I think fault might be the wrong word to use, but yeah, I think you had something to do with this for sure.
I mean, good Lord. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, the junior senator from the state of Texas has a podcast. You know what I mean? And he's supposed to be representing the people of Texas. He's podcasting. So if Micah Parsons winds up podcasting his way into that one makes no sense to me. That makes no sense to me.
That's one where I want more context. Like, what is it about him that's wearing thin? I had John Fossil, the Cowboys special teams coordinator, on my show today, Ross Tucker Football Podcast. And you know how with the new kickoff rule, most teams are going to have 2 deep returners instead of 1. And I said, any chance, you can give Micah Parsons a shot back there? Because Micah's from where I live. I went to his 3rd high school football game ever. Mm-hmm. And as you might, it was like watching Jim Brown when he had the ball. It was like the craziest thing you've ever seen. And he said, Micah's been lobbying hard. I'm thinking, that's exactly the type of guy you want. You're like one of the best players in the league wants to be your kick returner, like he's volunteering to do it.
I'm with you, but that reeks of why is Gronk on the extra point block team? And then you find out that Gronk has been blocking on extra point teams because you find out when he gets hurt like that. Yep. That's a dicey proposition. I got Ross Tucker here on the Rich Eisen Show. Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.